Hi everyone, welcome to one of those stories about a character that I played in the past. I've told a story about Grutkar, the flying meatball, before, as well as parts of Brynwind's story. And if you haven't seen those videos before, I'm going to link the playlist. They're both in the description below. There'll also be a card showing up right about now for you to click on if you're interested, but today's story is a little bit different, in that it'll be all about a character's backstory and not the actual gameplay. If you want to hear the backstory I gave Brynwind's character, let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to do that. But that's enough of that. Today we're talking about Mizet. So, what happened? Well, Mizet was a rabbit folk, heron god more specifically, who lived in the Feywild with a family of farmers in a small village. And he was approaching fast on adulthood, but from the beginning he knew that he wanted more out of life. He felt trapped there, longing for nothing more than to get out, and he was sure that he would do almost anything to do so, but he could see no way of actually doing it. And so he labored away day in and day out, working endlessly until one night, from a window in his parents' house, he saw a fire blazing brightly in the distance. The entire village woke up and moved into the night as a massive creature with the body of a lion and the heads of a lion, a goat, and a dragonoid-looking head soared off into the distance on large reptilian wings with a large serpentine tail slithering behind it. Luckily, no one was harmed in this chimera attack, but they weren't fortunate enough for that trend to continue. Mizet's father soon died in the struggle of another attack, and out of everyone they sent up to its nest that loomed over them from the top of a nearby hill, no one returned. That was when Mizet ventured alone. He would prove himself and finally find his way out of this village, and at that moment he set it upon himself to avenge his father and either kill this beast or die trying. He packed his crossbow and a couple of light daggers and headed out. But when he finished his arduous climb to the top of the hill and peeked over onto its grassy surface, he spied a spectacle that he could have never predicted. An ancient elven woman with face set firm against her quarry battled against this creature. She was pale with long white hair that cascaded down her shoulders in braids, but her face refused to show any remnants of whatever age she apparently seemed to be. The two fought with a grace like Mizet had never seen before, and her magic dazzled him like the tales of wonder he'd read about as a child. But just as quickly as it began, it was over. Injured, the creature fled and the woman disappeared in a majestic puff of purple smoke. But it didn't take long for Mizet to notice. The chance was right in front of him. He scrambled to the scene as flashes of torchlight flickered from below. His ticket out glared at him from the slabs of meat on the ground left over from the chimera and his weapons at his sides. He had a plan, and in a flash he tore his clothes, ripping them with his weapon, and smeared the creature's blood that had spattered upon the ground on him before firing off a few crossbow bolts into the flesh and into the ground. But he wasn't done yet. It wasn't convincing enough. Taking some of the cloth from his clothes in his mouth and biting down, he lifted the dagger in a moment of desperation and embedded it into one of his legs, carving wide gashes in his own skin. He cried out and fell to the ground, but he was running out of time. He crawled to the chimera's remaining flesh, dug his daggers in and sliced away, coating them in his blood before throwing one to the side. It wasn't long before the people made their way to the hillside. Mizet lay crumpled on the ground in pain, but that was exactly what he wanted. It had to look real. When they arrived, they were shocked and full of remorse. What Mizet hadn't realized was that he had positioned himself in the epicenter of the elven woman's magical blast. It wasn't very difficult to convince them that he had killed the thing, and he told himself that with someone as powerful as the elf who had fought the creature off, surely it wouldn't come back. His family and friends had become convinced that he had some sort of magical powers and patched him up before sending him off in a hero's parade with praise he didn't deserve. They rewarded him with the staff that had been passed down through generations and sent him on his way. But it wasn't long before, lost, alone, and afraid, Mizet stepped carelessly through a bit of ground, apparently, and landed himself in the material plane. This was the furthest from home that he'd ever been, so he was surprised and more than a little frightened. He had to survive by his wits and his wits alone, and actually ended up being a pretty good con man. Unknown to him, however, the woman that he saw that night was a powerful archfey, and she saw him arrange that whole scene. His close proximity to her had granted him such powers as he could have never dreamed of having, but he still had no idea why she was fighting this chimera or where it had come from. His staff served as a focus for the magic he didn't know he was casting. His sneeze would trigger a poison spray, and a lullaby would send creatures to sleep. But as awesome as he thought he was, and as full of himself as he definitely was, and he definitely was, there were times when he regretted the moment he ever saw the Fey woman, and wanted nothing more than to return home or at least figure out what happened all those months ago. And one thing was for sure, a life full of adventure and recognition would be his. After all, he already put everything he had into it and sacrificed so much. And whether he knew it or not, if he wanted to accomplish anything, he'd need more people. And that's it. I hope this story format was interesting and as fun to listen to as it was to tell. I know it ended up being kind of short, but it was only a backstory. If you like the story and want to hear more about some of my other characters' backstories and more about Mizet specifically, let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to tell more of them in the future. And be sure to come back next week where I'll talk a little bit about how I plan for sessions and a little bit more about Brynwind's story. She's a character I played a little while back and I'm really happy with how she turned out. And of course, until next time, let's learn something.